All right. We are up to chapter 11.
Saul defeats the Ammonites. See, a
Yep.
battle.
Now, you will recall the Ammonites were historic enemies of the Israelites. In fact, God had told the Jews early on to, what have I got here? Had told the Jews to annihilate the Ammonites, but as we can see, they're still there. They have not gotten rid of them, and they continue to be a pain in the side to the Israelites. Now, in chapter 11 here, this is Saul's first test as the new king, and he actually does fairly well with it. Shows that he does have promise as a leader, and the result of this is he goes from simply being declared king in chapter 10, or should say chosen king, to in chapter 11, they actually crown him as such and recognize that he is indeed the new chosen king. Now, verse 1, it says, Now Nahash the Ammonite came up and besieged Jabesh Gilead, and all the men of Jabesh said to Nahash, Make a covenant with us, and we will serve you. Now, before we go on, this Ammonite guy deserves a little bit of mention here. Does anybody remember when the Jews were wandering in the wilderness and they started being bitten by snakes, what God told them to do as a solution to it?
I remember.
Go ahead.
He told them to make a pole with a snake on it.
Mm-hmm.
When they looked at it, they weren't going to die. They were
Right.
bitten by a snake.
Now, here's the $62 question. That pole actually had a name. Does anybody know what that was?
I got a funny feeling it might be Nahash.
Very close. It was Nehushtan, which is a form of the Hebrew word for Nahash. In Hebrew, Nahash and Nehushtan are basically the same as the difference between calling somebody James or Jimmy. It's the same word, but just a slightly different spelling. And of course, written Hebrew, as you I'm sure all remember, doesn't have any vowels to it. And so Nahush and Nahash in Hebrew are essentially the same word, and it means snake. So this Ammonite, basically his name is Snake. Literally, that's his name. They called him Snake the Ammonite. And it's not even really so much a name as it's just Nahash is the word for snake or serpent in Hebrew. So for this guy to be called Snake the Ammonite kind of makes you wonder what kind of guy he was. Almost makes you wonder if he's the local drug dealer or something. All right. So anyway, Mr. Snake here pretty much tells the people in this town of Jabesh Gilead that he's going to come conquer their city, and that they have a choice to either surrender to him or prepare to be annihilated. And so when it says make a covenant with us and we will serve you, that basically is their way of saying, what are your terms of surrender? That's essentially what they're asking him. It says, but Nahash the Ammonite said to them, I will make it with you, in other words, a covenant, this surrender terms, I will make a covenant with you on this condition, that I will gouge out the right eye of every one of you. Thus I will make it a reproach on all Israel. Now, not to mention the extreme pain this would entail, because, of course, I'm sure the Israelites would not submit to this voluntarily. Going to take a couple of guys to hold the dude down while the other one takes a knife to his eyeball. So, I mean, you can imagine the absolute just searing pain this would cause. But why do you think the Ammonites would choose this particular type of handicap to make as a condition of their surrender?
It kind of eliminates them as being a warrior.
Depth perception.
You have no depth perception with only one eye. So even if you can make spears and arrows, you have no way of knowing, just, okay, how high, far to try to shoot this thing, because and I don't know if any of you are aware of this or not, but that's the reason God gave you two eyes, is it's the two eyes together that gives you depth perception. If you've only got one eye, you can't tell how far away something is. But it still leaves them with the ability to continue farming. So, I mean, you can see to farm your field, so the Ammonites could continue to raid their fields and demand that they get out and work and raise crops for the Ammonites, but it eliminates any possibility of them ever being able to raise up and fight against them. Plus, having an entire city full of men going around with one eyeball, that's, he says it'll make a reproach on all Israel. It would be a national embarrassment. All right, verse 3 says, And the elders of Jabesh said to him, Let us alone for 7 days, that we may send messengers throughout the territory of Israel. Then, if there is no one to deliver us, we will come out to you. Then the messengers came to Gibeah of Saul and spoke these words in the hearing of the people, and all the people lifted up their voices and wept. Well, verse 4, even though it doesn't say that they did, verse 4 tells us that apparently the Ammonites agreed to their conditions, because they got messengers out in verse 4 and went and told Saul. Now, my question for you is, if the Ammonites are laying siege to this city, why do you suppose they would agree to let these folks send messengers out to go ask for help? I mean, that's basically allowing the spies to get out knowing they're bringing reinforcements. What idiot would allow an enemy to do this?
Somebody who was spoiling for a fight so much that they wanted to take on whoever was going to come.
That's one possibility. There's another one. It is believed the Ammonites were powerful at this point and figured they were so sure of their ability to win. Actually, they were sure of two things. Number one, they figured that there's no way these Israelites are going to win this, so they figured, hey, we just give them 7 days and we'll just walk in and take over. They'll surrender themselves to us and we'll take this city without a fight. The second thing is, they didn't think that the Israelites would be able to raise any opposition, because as far as the Ammonites know, what leadership did Israel have at that point? None. Unlike the Ammonites and the Philistines, who had, a hierarchy, they had a standing army. The Israelites were an agrarian society. They did not have a standing army. They had no national leadership other than Samuel. And Samuel was a spiritual leader, not a military leader. So as far as the Ammonites were concerned, said, yeah, sure, you guys can go ask for help. We don't think you're going to get any. And even if you do, hey, we'll take them on too. Ammonites were sure of themselves. So they figured, yeah, we can wait 7 days and we'll take you guys without a fight. All right, so then they get to where Saul lives, which is in Gibeah. And they apparently sent some town criers to make the announcement in the middle of the town square that, hey, we're being attacked. We need some help from you folks. Then verse 5, it says, now behold, Saul was coming from the field behind the oxen, and he said, what is the matter with the people that they weep? So they related to him the words of the men of Jabesh. Now, why, if Saul is the new king, is he out plowing a field?
You don't know how to be a king.
That's one thing. Saul doesn't yet know how to be a king. But there's another possibility as well that would not necessarily look down on Saul, might actually prove that Saul at this point kind of does have at least some common sense. Israel had never had a king before. They had no national leadership, no federal government of any sort. So simply because Saul has been anointed and chosen king, is there any infrastructure in place at this point for him to be king?
Nope.
Not a bit. So at this point in history, Saul can't just say, okay, build my palace right over here and, appoint some palace guards to do this. He had no infrastructure to do any of that.
He's got no taxes to pay for anything.
He's got
either.
no taxes yet to pay for any of this. So, to Saul's credit, Saul's got enough common sense to realize he might as well go back home and go back to plowing because it's going to take a while to accomplish any of that. But when he comes in out of the field, he finds out that the men from the next town over are being besieged by the Ammonites. In verse 6, again, this is to Saul's credit. It says, then the Spirit of God came upon Saul mightily when he heard these words, and he became very angry. Now, what does this tell us at this point about Saul's relationship with God? Saul is still ignorant, but Saul has not at this point been rejected by God. He still has the anointing of the Spirit of God on him.
It still seems pretty much like a one-way relationship, though.
Well, yeah, because Saul's not really all that bright. But, again, to Saul's credit, how many of us, without the filling of the Holy Spirit, would really be all that bright? I mean, we do what we do because we have gifts of the Spirit. They didn't have that. So, I mean, we can't really fault Saul too much other than the fact that he's just not really that bright. But verse 7, interesting solution Saul comes up with here to insist on people rallying to him as the new king. Let's keep in mind, there are no soldiers in the sense of a standing army. Israel at this point is defended pretty much the same way our country was before the revolution. Nothing but a bunch of citizen soldiers. What we today would call the National Guard. Only they didn't have any training other than what they learned as they were growing up. So verse 7 says, and he took a yoke of oxen and cut them in pieces and sent them throughout the territory of Israel by the hand of messengers, saying, whoever does not come out after Saul and after Samuel, so shall it be done to his oxen. Then the dread of the Lord fell on the people, and they came out as one man. In other words, they came out in droves to rally to Saul. Again, to Saul's credit, notice how he phrases this. It's not just come out to me, respond to me and Samuel. He's still deferring to Samuel as the spiritual leader. It said, come to Saul and after Samuel. By the way, at this point, even though Samuel is mentioned here, where is Samuel in all of this story?
Back home?
He may be home or he may be here, but we don't really know what Samuel's up to at this point, because we're not told a whole lot of anything of Samuel's activity in any of this at this point. After his anointing of Saul and the party that he threw, Samuel's kind of faded back into the woodwork at this point. The stories about Saul at this point in history. All right, verse 8. And he numbered them in Bezek, and the sons of Israel were 300,000, the men of Judah 30,000. Now, depending upon which resource you read, there have been other theories as to the possible numbers and what have you, but what's more important here than the specifics of how many is...
Can I say something?
Go ahead.
Your bottle there is not level. And every time you move.
I know. It's because this is...
I know, but I just...
You waiting on it to fall? I'll do this.
Thank you.
There, will that make you more happy?
Much better.
Rise a little bit more.
Now put it down there, it'll probably fall over anyway. What's important at this point is not the specifics of the numbers here, but notice how it's described. The men of Israel and the men of Judah. What does that tell you has already started? Even at this point in history, and there isn't even a king yet other than Saul, the split between Judah and the rest of Israel has already begun. That it's Judah against everybody else. What's that?
I was wondering if that has something to do with because of Saul or not.
No, I don't think Saul is the issue behind it at this point.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that this goes all the way back to the prophecy from Jacob that Judah would actually be the preeminent tribe.
Mm-hmm.
And so even at this point in history, only a few generations after Jacob, what we're already seeing is this schism between the soon-to-be royal tribe and everybody else. Judah outnumbers everybody else. Judah has socially outdone everybody else. And also, if you look at the territory following the conquest, Judah actually had the best territory of any of the tribes. Another thing about Judah, if you look at a map of early Israel right after the conquest, Simeon is completely enclosed. I mean, they are encircled by the tribe of Judah. Simeon doesn't have any common border with anybody else except Judah. And because of that, after several generations, and the Judans, the tribe of Judah, of course we can later call them Judeans, slowly but surely encroached inward on what was Simeon's territory. And as the people of Judah grew, and the people of Simeon kind of little by little intermarried, over several generations, Simeon as a tribe just disappeared. Now we know that as far as their lineage, the tribes still exist, but they're very insignificant, and probably only God himself knows who is of that tribe and who isn't. Because they just got taken over by Judah. All right, verse 9. And they said to the messengers who had come, Thus you shall say to the men of Jabesh Gilead, Tomorrow by the time the sun is hot, you shall have deliverance. And of course, our common sense tells us when talking about by the time the sun's hot. What do you think that means? Yeah, mid-morning, 9,
10
10 o'clock. So the messengers went and told the men of Jabesh, and they were glad. Then the men of Jabesh said, tomorrow we will come out to you, and you may do to us whatever seems good to you. Now, this is important, because the people of the city have just now announced to the Ammonites, well, we're going to surrender to you tomorrow. So what do you think the Ammonites are doing the night before?
Partying.
Having a party, letting their guard down. They figure not going to be any battle tomorrow. They're giving up, just as we knew those weaklings would. So let's get drunk and have a party tonight. During the night, guess what happens? Saul and his brand new army come sneaking in under cover of night. They made their attack at early morning before the sun came up. Verse 11 says, and it happened the next morning that Saul put the people in 3 companies. They came into the midst of the camp at the morning watch and struck down the Ammonites until the heat of the day. And it came about that those who survived were scattered, so that no 2 of them were left together. Saul actually showed some tactical smarts here. He divided his army. Of course, 330,000 men, that's a lot of people. Divides them into 3 parts so that they attacked the camp of the Ammonites from 3 different directions. There is no way the Ammonites were going to be able to escape from this. Plus, they dropped their guard. They're having a party. Probably half of them, if not all of them, are drunk. They are not expecting an attack at the early, twilight hours. Probably just as soon as there was barely enough light for them to be able to see is when Saul more than likely attacked, which would have been sometime between 5 and 6 o'clock in the morning. And what if you have been partying all night? What are you doing at 5 o'clock in the morning? You are sound asleep and suffering from a hangover. Saul caught them with their proverbial pants down. And so Saul actually used some good common sense, which of course we can figure either Saul did this or this is the Spirit of God that's just led Saul to do this. So clearly Saul is showing some leadership here, albeit through the power of the Holy Spirit, as he should. Verse 12 says, then the people said to Samuel, now we see Samuel apparently is there, but we don't know what Samuel's doing other than the fact that he's kind of overseeing things. Then the people said to Samuel, who is he that said, shall Saul reign over us? Bring the men that we may put them to death. But Saul said, not a man shall be put to death this day, for today the Lord has accomplished deliverance in Israel. Now, this is probably the high point in all of Saul's kingship right here. After this, it's downhill from this point on. There's 2 things happen here. Saul has just led them successfully in their first battle, and it was an absolute rout. Second thing is he shows wisdom in that when the people say, hey, Saul is a good leader, where are those guys that said they're not going to follow Saul? Bring them out. We're going to execute them right here and now. And what did Saul do? No, time out, guys. God has delivered us today. Now, this is the second big thing that Saul does. Notice Saul did not say, I did this. He said, the Lord delivered us today. So to Saul's credit, he gives God the credit for what happened. He says, God has delivered us today. Ain't none of our people dying today. Put your swords down. Nobody's dying today. But now on the other hand, the guys who originally had said, we're not following Saul, what do you think they did after this?
We're ready to follow Saul.
Yeah, that probably is like, I didn't say that. It wasn't me. I'm following Saul. What's that?
He brought everybody together.
Yeah. So Saul's actually showing some good leadership at this point, and appropriately giving God the credit. But you'll notice, even though in verse 12 it says the people went to Samuel and said, we're following this guy. Where are those people that said that he was no good? We're going to execute him. We're not told Samuel responded. Apparently, if Samuel and Saul were together at this point, the best we can make out from the conversation that we're told about is that Saul apparently stepped up before Samuel had a chance to respond. And Saul steps in and says, no, nobody's dying today. We're not told that Samuel ever bothered to respond at all. Maybe he figured he didn't need to. And God may have, and again, this is all speculation, but it may have been at this point that God saw fit to tell Samuel to keep his peace and this is Saul's hour right now. So, we don't hear anything out of Samuel here until verse 14, after Saul had intervened. Verse 14 says, Then Samuel said to the people, Come and let us go to Gilgal and renew the kingdom there. So all the people went to Gilgal, and there they made Saul king before the Lord in Gilgal. Now notice, again, earlier Samuel anointed Saul, but nobody except them knew about it. Then the previous chapter, Saul is chosen, but it wasn't exactly unanimous. There were his detractors that said, no way we're following this guy. But there's no indication of any kind of coronation at all. But notice here in verse 15, it says, There they made Saul king before the Lord. What does that tell you? They had a coronation. Saul has now been officially crowned king. So there they also offered sacrifices of peace offerings before the Lord, and there Saul and all the men of Israel rejoiced greatly. So what we see here is that Saul has gone from hiding in the baggage because he's afraid, it's like, I don't want to be the king. I mean, that's kind of what the impression we get. Saul is told, you're now the new king, and what does Saul do? He goes and hides. To now, he has just successfully led them in battle with an army of 330,000 men and had an absolute, total victory. And then shows some spiritual leadership by saying, hey, let's just all get together, make peace with each other, let's go celebrate. The Lord's delivered us. Yeah. All within the space of just a few days. Clearly, at this point in history, Saul actually was showing signs of being a good king. For now. Questions?
Does this sort of follow Jesus in respect to the anointment and the coronation and that? I mean, it was like, I got to find it. There was an old sermon I listened to that someone explained that, as far as how Jesus was anointed by the Lord and the coronation comes later after the victory and all that. I didn't know if it'd ring a bell with you at all or anything, so I'll try to find the sermon.
Mm-hmm.
I'll try to find the passages in the New Testament. It was interesting because I'm listening to this, I'm thinking that, but it's been a while, so it's gone.
Interesting thing about Jesus' coronation. Now I realize that the book of Revelation tells us that we'll all be throwing our crowns, back to him and that he's crowned king, but from the social and the perspective of royalty, Jesus has already been crowned king. A lot of folks don't realize that, but the Romans crowned him king themselves. It wasn't exactly a comfortable crown, but they did. They handed him a royal scepter, they put a crown on his head, they put a purple robe on him, and declared, "Hail the King of the Jews." They may have been joking about it, but it's one of those things that while they were joking, God got the last laugh. Anyway, any other questions this evening? Bruce?
Since you brought up the snake on the pole, other than making a neat emblem for the medical community, What was the thing? Why do you think the snake was used for something like that?
It was not that, I think it was just, did God have any particular reason for that, specific image? The Bible never says, but the purpose behind it was a matter of faith and obedience, because he told them to put it on a pole, and they were told, you have to look up and physically look upon this image in order to be healed. And of course, if they failed to do that, they weren't healed. So the test here was one of faith and obedience, that you've got to do what Moses tells you to do in order to be healed of this. Now again, why God chose that particular image, can't really say, other than the fact that it was an image of the very thing that was actually biting them.
Yeah, I mean, the snakes were killing the people.
Mm-hmm.
It just struck me a little odd.
Well, it wouldn't be the first time that God told us to do something that in our mind didn't make any sense. Which again is one of those things where you have to, the only answer to it is faith and obedience. If you're not willing to do what he says, then, don't expect to get your prayers answered.
Isn't the snake on the pole also a precursor for Jesus on the cross?
It is. Of course, the only other parallel you can draw from that is the fact that the snake is a cursed animal, and the Bible very clearly tells us that by being hung on a tree, that Jesus fulfilled the curse of the law. So there is a parallel in that respect. What's that?
Crushed the head.
Yeah.
With the heel.
Which, by the way, that's the biblical proof that when you see depictions of Jesus having been crucified with the nail through the top of his foot, that is not scriptural.
No.
The scriptural method is that the nail went this way, which actually tells us it wasn't 3 nails, it was probably 4. 1 in each hand and 1 on each foot, because the nail would have had to come in through the side in front of the Achilles tendon. Which would be, the only way you could actually suspend a man by his feet without breaking the bones in his feet, and also fulfilling what God told Adam and Eve, or Eve specifically, when he referred to Satan bruising his heel. Not his foot, his heel. Anyway, anybody else?
It's a good point about not going through the top of the foot, because bones would be broken doing that, and Jesus had no bones broken.
Yep, not a bone was
The
broken.
same is true for the hand.
Mhm.
If you go through the middle of the hand like they depict it, you'd be breaking bones going through there.
Mhm. But
Going
here,
through
all it
here,
does is
you go-
separate the bones.
Yeah, you go between the 2 bones of the arm.
Mhm.